We arrived here around 9:45 a.m., so we'd been moving for 2 hours and 45 minutes, and we were 6 miles in at this point. 25% of the way finished with our day. I will say, going into the hike this morning with the thought process of, it's going to be a long, hard day, and I'm hiking until the sun goes down, so there is no end. This is my life now. I live on the Northville Placid Trail, and I'm not going to be finished walking until it's dark out. It made for a unique mindset, because now the pain in my feet and the long miles, they were way easier to ignore when this is what my brain is thinking. It was the right mindset for me on this day. Though getting here and knowing we were a quarter of the way done, I will say that was a mental pick-me-up. It showed progress was being made. Godfrey Road is only 1.3 miles from here, so if you're looking to section the NPT, or a campsite that is very accessible in that regard, this is a good one. And there's a parking lot at that road. There's a nice big wooden bridge over the West Stony Creek here too, which leads to the campsite and the trail to Godfrey Road, but we didn't go over it, just looked at it. And now we were 6.4 miles away from our next checkpoint, which was Woods Lake, our lunch destination and the halfway point on our day. And this is the longest stretch of trail on the entire NPT map without any landmarks. It's just a nice long 6.4 miles threading between mountains and climbing up and over some smaller ones. So we had a swig and a snack, and then we kept walking. Time to start the second half of our morning and the long push to Woods Lake. Nice mix of trees here in the woods. We have 6.3 miles until we're at Woods Lake, which is where we'll stop and have lunch and relax for a minute before our big push to Northville. But it's quite a ways away. 6.3 miles in one stretch of the map with no landmarks in between. Yeah, it's going to be a long next few hours here. Fortunately, the weather is really nice. The bugs aren't too bad yet. They're still here. I have the bug net on. They're not as bad as they were yesterday. Temperature is cool and there's some decent cloud cover, so it might not be as warm. And it will be pleasant in that regard, thankfully. Now we're down at the river. Nice and wide, probably 50 feet across. The trail here runs up on a bank along the river for about half a mile, looking down at the water, which is pretty wide and fast flowing. The trees here were once again a nice mix, and the new season's green leaves were everywhere, making for a terrific hue in the forest as the sun shone through them. This stretch of the trail brought something we hadn't seen for quite a while, that being walking on what was clearly a logging road at one point. A very wide, traveled road that nature has slowly but surely been taking back as its own over the past number of decades. These big, wide trails that were clearly once a road. So it's been a little while since we've had this, but the woods are nice and open here. New leaves, plenty of big spruce trees. Nice wide trail. Very clean though. Very fast to walk down. Some muddy sections, but that's to be expected. But for the most part, pretty decent. Pretty decent. And we need it to be fast because we have a lot of more miles to go. It was nice walking on a big wide trail for a little while. Those logging road stretches do tend to be somewhat muddy though, but it was minimal today, fortunately, thanks to the week's unusually warm and dry weather. This 6.4 mile section was definitely a lull in my mind, and in our overall morale on the trail, I will say. Not because we didn't want to be there, but because we knew we had over 6 miles until the next thing to see, so we just kept walking and walking. Oh, and then we went over a little footbridge, and that was cool. And then we kept walking some more, and some more. Big logs to cross over. Nice and easy, nice and bouncy. Always a fun time, a little pick-me-up from the somewhat monotonous last few miles we've done. Everything does look similar, pretty much the same. So that bridge was nice. I was really into that. Continuing towards Woods Lake. There was a handful of times where James, Sarah, and I were all doing the quiet zombie walk to ourselves, lost in our thoughts. And I noticed a few times while doing the zoned out zombie walk where I instantly realized, wait, this isn't the trail. And then I'd look around, knowing we were off trail, and it always turned out to be just a few steps behind me or to the right or to the left. That happened a few times here, and I found it interesting how the fact that the woods can look the same all around you for miles and miles, and then suddenly you can know and feel that you're off trail within 1 or 2 steps. Just instantly, you know, oh, I'm not on the trail anymore. Fortunately, anytime this did happen, we were literally less than 10 feet from the trail, so it was no big deal. It's definitely something you'll start to be able to just feel as you hike this trail. Or hiking and being in the woods in general, really. We crossed over the footbridge at Abner Brook, and then we climbed up to a ridge where we arrived on top around 11:20 a.m. This ridge was very memorable for me because we climbed and left a hardwood forest, and then we were met with dozens of giant, well spread out spruce trees all around the top of the ridge. Tons of them, and nothing else. The spruces were on top of a ridge, and then you climb up and over the ridge. So when you get to the top of the ridge, you're in that huge area with the giant spruce trees everywhere, dozens of them, monsters. And then as soon as you get over the ridge to the other side of the ridge where we're currently climbing down, instantly it's 100% hardwood trees, big and small. You can see the line at the top of the ridge separates these areas here, which is pretty cool. Lots of open space, huge old spruce trees everywhere. I love those areas in the woods. And then the trail winds around and over the ridge to start climbing right back down. And then a mere feet from the top of the ridge, you can see a distinct line in the woods, and the forest is now all green hardwood trees and no spruce or pines anywhere. And you know, I always enjoy seeing that distinct line in the woods. And it happens a lot on the NPT, as you may imagine, over the course of 138 miles. This section of the trail also involves crossing over quite a number of rivers and streams. So again, lots of places to get water. And many of them have footbridges as well, so that helps break up the monotony ever so slightly on this long stretch. You know, for the 3.5 seconds that you're walking on the bridge. After we climbed back down this little hump, there were 4 distinct river crossings on the map over a short period of time. And once we were over those 4 rivers, we'd be close to the beginning of Woods Lake. So as you can imagine, I was breaking up this 6.4 mile stretch with mental checkpoints the best way I could. My feet definitely didn't feel great at this point, but they were still okay. Just okay. So that was good. And one of the good things about this stretch of the hike, where I was waiting to check off these 4 river crossings, was that Sarah, James, and I were enjoying some nice, intelligent conversation that made time go by very fast. And then when I took out my GPS to check the map to see where we were, we had already crossed over 3 of the 4 rivers, and I didn't even notice. So that was a major mental pick-me-up for sure. It's kind of like when you check your map hiking in the high peaks, and the first time you look at it, you're actually just about at the summit. It's hard to beat that feeling of joy in those little moments. Soon we passed over the footbridge at river crossing number 4, and we were about to start climbing around the base of Little Cathead Mountain, on our left to the east. We have probably about 2 miles left until we get to Woods Lake, where we'll eat lunch. We're currently walking around the base of Little Cathead Mountain. Yes, that is called Little Cathead Mountain, right here on our left. So we're walking around the base of that, and that's going to take us all the way over to another river crossing, which will be right around Woods Lake, which I am thrilled because I'm hungry, definitely getting some blisters, and I can't wait to change my socks for the second push of the day. Over and out. This portion involves some climbing and elevation gain, but it was great because it also changed things up quite a bit from the last 4 miles or so. We walked along some cliffs and some big rock slabs going up the western slope of Little Cathead. And then at 12:50, we came to 3 distinct, gigantic boulders that the trail walks in between. And you'll know these boulders when you see them. They're enormous. And they're right next to each other, and you'll walk right between them. They're each probably 15 to 20 feet high. Feet to the top. Huge. You'll know that spot when you pass through it. Real cool. We just walked over a wooden bridge. Looks like we're about to climb right here in front of us.
we're almost at Woods Lake, thankfully. And the sun is shining. Bugs aren't terrible. So far, so good.
As we continued walking around the base of Little Cathead Mountain, I caught a glimpse of that blue glimmer shining through the trees to my right. Woods Lake, looking as glorious as I ever could have imagined. We were almost there. Now we just had to walk around the lake to the campsite, and it would be lunchtime, and this 6.4-mile stretch would be complete. Just before we landed at the campsite, we passed a couple of local hikers who've hiked the entire NPT multiple times in both directions, and we're just doing a day hike today from Northville to Godfrey Road, which is about 17 miles or so. And it turns out one of them knew Sarah and has worked with her mom for years. A strange and small world it is. So they chatted for a few minutes, and then we completed our hike to the campsites at Woods Lake at 1 o'clock, and it was lunchtime.
Our day is just over halfway complete. We're going to eat some lunch and then hump it to Northville.
We were roughly halfway finished with our day. We'll just call it roughly 12 miles done, with roughly 12 more miles to go. And 12 miles of hiking in exactly 5 hours? Right on pace. But time to eat lunch. My lunch today wasn't great. A dry bagel and peanut butter for good substance, a Snickers bar, a protein bar, and a bag of beef jerky for some meat and protein. I had to eat with the bug net on once again, of course. I actually wore the bug net for the entire day today, start to finish. But we sat down at the campsite, took off our packs, and relaxed. I decided to eat part of my lunch down at the water, and since we still had another big push for the day, I knew I was going to change my socks and some of my clothes. That way I would be as fresh as I can be for the second half of the day. So I decided to eat my lunch with my feet in the water here at Woods Lake, and it was amazing. I probably stayed down there in the water for a good 20 minutes, and I know it helped my feet feel better and breathed new life into both them and my soul. It was beautiful. I also changed my shirt, so I felt like a totally new man after lunch, and it was exactly what I needed for the final push. My morale was very high. If you've listened to my podcast for a while, you've probably noticed that I don't tend to take very long lunch breaks. Solely because I'm just anxious to keep moving to get to the final summit for the longer break, or my day's destination. So today's 90-minute lunch break was easily the longest lunch break that I've ever experienced on any hike. Come to think of it, I don't think I've ever even stopped for 45 minutes for the most part. I also find the longer I wait, the more my body tends to lock up a bit. But hanging out in the lake today, changing my clothes, and that last day of school feeling that I felt inside, I was in a great mood and I was ready to tackle the remaining 12 miles. And in my mind, the 3.5 road miles at the end didn't even count, because those are victory miles on pavement where I'll just walk in my Crocs. So I just kept telling myself, and out loud to James and Sarah, hey, it's only 8.5 miles. The road walk doesn't count. So that was a big boost for me emotionally. We left the big, open Woods Lake campsite, which sits up on the bank overlooking the giant lake, at 2:30 p.m. The final leg is upon us. The trail walks up and away from the lake and the campsites as you make your way to the Benson Road crossing and the trail parking for Woods Lake, which is probably half a mile or so from the campsites. And then before we knew it, as we were getting the wheels moving again after lunch, we could hear the cars ahead, and then we walked out onto Benson Road, maybe 5 minutes after leaving the lake.
Road crossing. Northville Placid Trail, Woods Lake Trail, Silver Lake Wilderness. There's a little trailhead parking lot right up there. This is where I'm guessing we're going to walk to. Civilization. Cars, roads with yellow lines and white lines. Double yellow, so don't even think about passing anybody on this road. So yeah, if you wanted to do some section hiking, here's a great spot to park here at this road crossing at Woods Lake. Just looking for the entrance to the woods here. Got some New Jersey plates, some New York plates, some Rhode Island plates. Here we go, trail. We're about 12 miles from